Hey, welcome back to part two of our How to Play A Song of Ice and Fire, the miniatures game on Tabletop Simulator series. Wow, that's a handful. um, so, this part I was tempted to call Tabletop Simulator Basics, but I thought, I would like to put in some more things that are not just super basic, but that I consider quite important to know to make this experience as good as it can be. So I think I'm going to call that this part Essentials, Tabletop Simulator Essentials. You've opened Tabletop Simulator, and the first thing that you want to do is adjust some settings. Okay, so let's go to Menu and go to Configuration. And on this first page, there is an option called Mod Threading. So the idea of this is to speed up loading of a mod, right? However, I've seen this causing issues for many people. So quite often you might actually end up seeing cubes instead of 3D models, right? So by default, this will be checked, and I would like you to uncheck that, right? So it will slow down loading of the mod a little bit, but it'll be more stable. So that's I think quite important. All right, so that's all you need to do on this page. So close that. And then on options, if you're the host, that's quite important. There is this physics menu option. So click on that, brings up the physics dialog. And the default for physics is going to be full. Okay, so when you open that, that's what you're going to see. And I would suggest you change this to locked. See, Tabletop Simulator comes with a physics engine, and that allows you to do some neat stuff, but for the most part, it gets in the way of playing board games or miniature games. And what the locked option does, it prevents objects from interacting with objects that are at rest on the table. Otherwise, you might go about and knock stuff over, and the locked option is going to prevent that. So this will provide a much better gaming experience. So let's get ahead with actually controlling the thing. So the first thing that you need to know is how to zoom in and out, and you do that with a mouse wheel. So just move the mouse wheel up and down, and you'll zoom in and out. You may want to change your point of view, and you just right click wherever the mouse cursor is, and then you move your mouse left and right or up and down. You can also move about and you do that by pressing the mouse wheel and then move your mouse left, right, up, down. Okay. Alternatively, you can use the W, A, S, and D keys on your keyboard. So this is very similar to first-person shooter, for example. Now, how do you interact with objects? That happens by left-clicking them. So if you want to move something about, like this House Bolton Blackguards unit, just point on it, hold down your left mouse button, picks it up, and then you move the mouse about. And as you release, it drops it. So pretty basic stuff. You can also do multi-select. Just hold down your left mouse button, draw a rectangle, release, and now you can pick up multiple units at once. Okay. Let's say you need to turn those around because you actually want to sit on the other side of the table. Then while holding them up, you just use your mouse wheel, spins the entire thing around. You can also point on selection and use Q and E, and it will spin them in place. So let's change our perspective here. So these are the basic controls. Now another thing that you will often need is measure distances. And you do that by pointing at something, holding down the Tab key on the keyboard and then drag your mouse, and it will start measuring the distance. If you want to know how far an object moved, you can pick it up, hold Tab while it's picked up, and then start moving the object, and it will tell you how far you're actually moving that object. If you release Tab and press Escape on your keyboard without ever releasing the left mouse button, the object is going to remove to its original position. So that can be quite useful if you, for example, need to see whether a unit can get into the flank of another unit or something like that. The other thing that the Tab key does is if you don't hold it and just press it briefly, it shows an arrow to location. So this is useful when you need to indicate to your opponent that a particular unit is supposed to do a panic check or something like that. So if you want to point anything out on the gaming table, just point at it, press Tab, and an arrow will show up. And this will be visible to all players on the table. Now the measurement tool has a couple of options that can be quite useful. So on the left side of the screen, we have all these different controls, and the fourth from the top, that is actually the tool that's used for measurement, right? And I'm currently using the ruler mode free. The default is actually auto. Okay, what that does is in itself it doesn't do anything actually, but this is always combined with the next option, hovered object, which says either edge or center. And this is the point from which you're measuring things, right? So if I hover over those blackouts again, press Tab, you see the ruler is basically glued to the edge of that object. And if I then hit another object, it's glued to the edge of that object. And I see the distance between the two objects. So that allows me to very precisely measure the distance between two objects. If instead of edge, I use center, I can measure the distance between the center of two objects. More often than not, the edge is actually more useful. And with the auto mode enabled, if I measure the distance moved of an object, it's always going to be center. Okay. Another thing that the Song of Ice and Fire mod will quite often do for you is locking objects. This is to prevent any physics shenanigans. Is there to improve your gaming experience. But occasionally you may need to unlock an object again, and then maybe lock it again afterwards. So if you need to do that, you point an object, and this is currently unlocked, meaning I can move it about freely, right? However, if I point on it and press L on the keyboard, it's no longer highlighted. Like if I go over the cutthroats, you see how they highlight. This one no longer highlights. And if I try to pick it up, the game won't let me do it. So this is locked in place. If I need to unlock it again, I point on it and press L again. It becomes unlocked and I can move it about again. So in order to play the game, you also need to interact with cards and dice. So let's get quickly on the other side of the table and have a look at the tactics deck. So first thing you need to do is shuffle your deck, and you do that by pointing the hand cursor on the deck and press R on your keyboard. R is in randomize, I guess, and you'll see this animation and you will hear shuffling sound as confirmation that you shuffled your deck. Drawing a card can be done by either right-clicking a deck and click draw from the context menu, and that will draw a single card into your hand. If you need to draw several cards at once, you point onto the deck and you press the number of cards you want to draw on your keyboard. So I need 2 more cards, hence I press 2 on my keyboard and it will immediately draw 2 cards to my hand. Your hand is always displayed at the bottom of the screen. You can see as you hover over a card, it will pop up the entire hand, otherwise it hides it away. You can also see the cards in your hand zone. Your opponent will just see the backs of the cards, so don't worry about that, as you will only see the back of your opponent's cards, but your opponent can always see how many cards you have in hand. And this can also be useful for effects that allow you to discard a random card from your opponent. Often you would just do that for your opponent, right? You don't know which card is which, so your opponent will just allow you to draw a single card, and you can draw that from that hand zone on his side of the table. So let's draw that back in. So that's how you draw and play cards. You can play them from the hand zone, from your hand down here, just drag and drop onto the table. There's also a handy discard pile. You can also entirely hide your hand if you find it annoying that you see your hand down here at the bottom of the screen. You can do that by pressing H on your keyboard, and as you can see, the entire hand is gone. You bring it back by pressing H again. More often than not, this will happen by accident. It's a common question I get from people, oh, where's my hand gone? So pressing H does that. Occasionally, you will also need to search a deck, and in order to do that, you right-click the deck or discard pile that you want to search. Click on search, brings up the search window, and you can just choose whichever card you want from there, drag it out, or draw it to your hand. If you play a card to the table and for whatever reason it's face down, you can then flip it face up by pressing F on your keyboard. So F flips a card up or down. Now a card on the table like this is very hard to read, obviously, and what you can do is press Alt on your keyboard, and that will bring up a magnified version of the card. You can then use your mouse wheel to zoom in and out even more as needed. You can also use the Alt key in combination with the Shift key to see the underside of the card. Okay, so to peek under a card, well, in this case, it's just the back of the card, but Alt and Shift does do that for you. That can be useful for unit cards, for example. Let's say I need to remind myself of the point value of the cutthroats here. Shift and Alt brings up the backside, and I can see that. And finally, if you have a bunch of cards on the table that you would like to discard at once, you can select all of them and then press G on your keyboard. That will group them again into a single stack, and you can then drop that onto your discard pile. Now, how to roll dice. There are a number of dice already available here. There's different ways of how that works, but I'll get into that later. Now I just want to show you how the basics work of rolling a dice in Tabletop Simulator. Just drag the dice onto the dice tray, and if I need to roll several dice, I select all of them, and then again press R on my keyboard, and it will just roll them for me. If I want, I can press R several times, and as long as I press R, they keep rolling. Don't overdo that, you might annoy your opponent, but that's also possible. Another thing that you can do, and that can occasionally be useful, is the drawing tool. So you can do that to draw a line on the table. Okay, if you need to indicate something, that's also an option. Or if you need to remember a particular location, you can do that. Or you can use the erase function, for example, to get rid of lines. So this, after deployment is done, for example, you can also use that to get rid of these deployment lines on the table. If you find them annoying, just use the erasure tool to get rid of them. And I think these are the Tabletop Simulator Essentials. So see you on the next one. Stay hydrated. Cheers.